Welcome to Making Peace Visible. I'm your host, Jamil Simon. On this podcast, we like to advocate for having good faith discussions across divides. We also like to shine a light on organizations that are facilitating dialogue across divides, but in creative ways. Bridging divides is easier said than done. I mean, where do you start? And if you do find yourself in a conversation with someone who has very different beliefs from your own, what happens if you say something that offends them? And if you feel threatened, what happens then? In Copenhagen, a group of volunteers has found a way to make face-to-face conversations across differences easier and even fun. It's called the Human Library. Independent journalist Scott Gurian paid the Human Library a visit. What you're about to hear is an episode from his podcast, Far From Home. Here's Scott Gurian with Human Library.
If you're ever wandering around the Nørrebro neighborhood of Copenhagen on a Sunday afternoon, you might come across a small building next to a sort of garden area with some wooden seats. And if the weather is nice, you'll see people from all walks of life sitting under the shade of some umbrellas, the way you might see friends or colleagues outside a cafe talking about their kids or catching up on the latest gossip from work. But despite first appearances, you'll soon realize that this isn't just a new coffee shop or a city park, because there on the front of the building is a sign with a long word in Danish proclaiming this the home of the Menneske Biblioteket. And for those who aren't fluent, there's another sign below it with the English translation explaining that this is the Human Library Reading Garden. I stumbled across this sign and this building when I was visiting Copenhagen a few years ago, and I was curious to learn what it was all about, so I popped in and struck up a conversation with Andrea Truslow, who is one of the Human Library librarians.
Right now we're at our reading garden in Copenhagen. How it works is that readers stop by and then we have a board with topics, and then the reader can choose whatever topic they'd like to read. We are a library, so we have regular, normal library rules, is that you can't take the book home and you have to give it back on time, so you have 30 minutes, and you can't tear out any pages, meaning you have to be respectful towards the book, and it's a conversation. So it's up to the reader to sort of direct and steer the conversation, depending on what they want to know about the topic.
It's a conversation, she explained to me, because there's a big difference between this and most other libraries.
The books are people answering any question they like, and all of our books are volunteers, so they offer their time to help out other people with their curiosities.
That's right. As its name suggests, at the Human Library, the so-called books are actually volunteer human beings who patrons can loan out to learn about their unique life experiences. And when Andrea speaks about curiosities, she means deeply personal and intimate conversations where people discuss the sorts of topics that might often be considered off-limits or taboo in polite society. On the day I visited, for example, some of the books readers could choose from were someone talking about what it's like to have ADHD, someone who is a victim of violence, and someone who put their child up for adoption. When people are borrowing these books, can they ask them anything? Is anything off limits?
We usually say all questions are allowed as long as they come from a place of respect and as long as they are in regard to the topic. But yeah, all questions are allowed.
But I assume the book, if something's too personal, if they're uncomfortable, they could say no.
The book is very welcome to say, unfortunately, that chapter hasn't been written yet. We use very library terms because we are a library. But yeah, the book is always in charge, so they're always able to say, oh, I don't want to answer that, or I'm not comfortable answering that, so yeah.
Why do you think it's important that the Human Library exists in the world?
I think it's important because we all judge, and it's also important to be aware that that's okay, because that's a way of coping with life. But I also think that it's important to have the opportunity to, as we say, unjudge that person. So to have them prove that what you think is not correct.
After speaking with Andrea, I thought this whole concept of a human library was pretty interesting. But to truly understand how it worked, I decided I needed to check out a book myself.
Good to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you. Do you mind introducing yourself first?
Of course. My name is Samuel. I'm 20 years old and I'm a book at the Human Library. My title is Multiply Disabled. And my goal is to show people that I can live a completely, or at least very close to normal life and, hang out with friends and go to school and do all the things that 20-year-olds do, despite having a chronic illness/disability. And if I just have to give a bit of an idea of my disability, I have some sort of muscular dystrophy that's undiagnosed, and I'm supposedly the only one who has it. And it affects my eyes, so I'm nearly blind. So I have a helper with me that functions as my eyes all the time. And then I have a wheelchair that I use for longer transport, but I can walk a bit. So, for example, at home or at school, I walk around. And then my digestive tract doesn't work as well. So I get all my food through my blood in the night, like when you get a drip, like a medicine in a hospital. But overall, I try to live as normal a life as I possibly can, and I have been to normal school my entire life. Luckily, the brain is not a muscle, so it's not affected. And I'm a musician, I play drums, and I have a lot of hobbies and do normal 20-year-old stuff, go to parties and play board games and yeah.
How did you hear about the Human Library?
It was actually one of my nurses, who's one of the people responsible for my food, who introduced me to it because she thought it would be just something that I would enjoy doing. I love talking to strangers and making them realize that disability is not what they think it is, and it doesn't impact people's lives in the way that they may stereotypically think about it doing.
So you decided to get involved to kind of change people's perceptions?
Exactly. And just to hopefully learn something myself as well. When you meet discrimination or different sorts of pre-assumptions about you, it's important to realize that the people doing that and saying those things are probably not saying it to hurt you. Sometimes they definitely can, but most of the time it's just from not knowing any better, and it's important to be able to tell them why that's wrong and not just, run away.
What sorts of questions do people ask you?
It depends a lot on the person. It depends on why they borrow me as a book. It varies from very practical stuff, like how do you go to school and what sort of help do you get, to very philosophical stuff like about friendship and relationship and my thoughts on life and also music. Some of the most interesting questions I've gotten was about how music has influenced me as a person and how it's helped me deal with problems.
What do you think people get out of this?
I hope that they get a perspective on how it's actually to have a disability and not how the media portrays it, because there's a lot of pity porn, I call it. That's like look at these poor guys, they need help and stuff like that. But I'm capable. I can live a full and normal life. The worst thing about having a disability is not the disability itself, it's how people view you.
We all know the concept of, you're like an open book, sort of that figure of speech that's often used around people who are helpful to us in understanding by providing us insight and stuff. But the true concept of actually putting people on loan, you could say, as an open book about their lived experience in this conversation format is something that I created with some help from coworkers 23 years ago.
Ronnie Abergel is the original founder of the Human Library, which started in Denmark but has since spread around the world. A few days after visiting the library's reading garden, I met up with him at his office in Copenhagen's Christianshavn neighborhood to learn how he first came up with the idea.
There was an assignment from a festival here that said, hey, can you guys create an opportunity for the guests on the festival? Something that will, if not distract them from Bob Dylan and Beastie Boys, then at least complement the whole experience of being in this atmosphere for a whole week with bands and fun and culture and experiences. And so we had to dig kind of deep to figure out, how do you make something that's attractive when what you're up against are worldwide musical acts? And so I always had this idea about creating a space where we could ask the questions that often were potentially frowned upon. Because I always felt, even as a child, I remember a great curiosity about people who were different from me. And so I'm the type to point fingers and point people out. And my mom would always be, you can't do that, quiet and don't point. But that was me. That was me like, look, Ma, there's I was almost going to say a bearded lady, but that was, cross-dressers back in the 70s. That's what they look like to a child. So I remember these situations, and she would always tell me, you can't say that. But, sometimes we meet people and there's just the elephant in the room. There's something about them that we really want to address, but it's too personal. Like if somebody had an incredible large tattoo on their face, you're wondering when you see that, wow, why is that so important to you that you would put that on your face? Because to many of us, that is like a sacred place, isn't it? So to many people, that'll be the big question when you see that person. So I wanted to create a framework where the invitation was there. Sure, ask me about my obesity, or ask me about my skin issue, or ask me about my ethnicity, my religion, my orientation. And this kind of safe space where you wouldn't be judged. Also for not knowing. I thought maybe the festival would be an accepting place to bring in even some of our most vulnerable groups, some of the groups that are exposed to hate crimes, and sort of put them out in the public space and say, hey, come and talk to me about who I am. Go and dismantle the hearsay, challenge the bias, and take responsibility for the fact that we all judge. We're not part of the legal system, but we sort of operate our own judicial system inside, where if you do something that disqualifies you from my grace, from my care, from my affection, from my friendship, from my respect, I'm judging you all the time. You're judging me. And so when we see something we think we don't like, we might avoid that. And that could be a potential friend. And I think if we're able to create a safe space where we can connect, then we have the potential to build meaningful relations.
So the concept of the human library was born, but this was a totally new experiment, and no one knew whether it would actually succeed. In fact, when Ronnie shared his vision with his colleagues, they were initially a bit skeptical.
They said, but what if nobody shows up? I said, if nobody shows up, then in our book depot there, waiting for readers at the festival, we're going to have a police officer, a free marijuana activist, somebody who has a mental health background, somebody who has different religious backgrounds. We're going to have people with different orientations. You're going to have people with disabilities. You're going to have unhoused people. You're going to have all kinds of, diversity there. So worst case, these people will be reading each other. Oh, what's your topic? Oh, I see you have a big tattoo on your face. Are you the body modified? Or I see your tics. Are you OCD? They'll sit there waiting and get to know each other, observe, sense, converse. And so I try to argue that we could win small or big. Small would be the 75 volunteer books that would win each other and win insight into themselves and into others. Big would be the connection with readers and community.
Thankfully, as things turned out, they won big. Ronnie's coworkers needn't have worried because the response exceeded their expectations.
It was incredible. It was over 1,000 people that joined the initiative and signed out books and spent time with them. And some of the stories we got back from our books about how the loan had been were inspiring, empowering, and life-confirming, and letting us understand that this concept is doing something completely unique because it's truly connecting people in a way that's very difficult. It is difficult to connect people. Sure, we can have a shared experience, 36,000 in front of the stage listening to whoever band we all adore, or we could go to another stadium and watch a sport event, but sort of connecting strangers. I mean, you'll sit next to the occasional person at a wedding or a birthday and you get to know somebody, or on a plane or on a train or wherever. There's opportunities to connect, but we don't really hear. That's the whole point. The whole point is let's connect and talk about your life. Help me understand. How'd you become a drug addict? Or help me understand, when did you realize you were HIV positive? We're using backgrounds that help challenge us, so the response just made me realize that potentially this model could benefit communities all around the world. And we've been kind of doing that ever since.
More from Ronnie Abergel and the Human Library after this.
If I asked you what political violence looks like, you'd have an image in your mind right away. With the constant barrage of news stories about war and violence, we're saturated with such images. But what does peace look like? Peace is a guerrilla group in Colombia turning in their weapons after 50 years of fighting. Or Democrats and Republicans sitting around a dinner table discussing what they have in common. Or Jews and Muslims laughing together at a comedy show in Jerusalem during quarantine. On Making Peace Visible, we speak with journalists, peace builders, and activists who shine a light on these underreported stories. And we look critically at the oversimplified narratives in today's news media, asking what we need to change and how. You can find Making Peace Visible wherever you listen to podcasts.
After their enormous success hosting the first human library at that music festival, people asked Ronnie and his colleagues to organize something similar at a youth assembly in Oslo, Norway. Then they brought the library to Hungary and Portugal, and the invitations kept coming. Over time, they ironed out the process and turned the library into a more formal organization.
I started developing the methodology further. Today there are really clear rules. There's a very clearly defined training course for new books. There's a training course for librarians. There's volunteer rights. There's code of conduct and ethics and all this stuff that, wasn't there early on. But at the core, it's the same thing. It's people who, you could say, as a publisher, took the liberty of preparing for you so that you're ready to read them. So sort of like an editor and book publisher, we just grabbed a hold of a person and said, hey, let us teach you how to surrender to the role of being an open book and then help you make your lived experience extremely valuable to other people.
And as part of that process, they fine-tuned their mission to specify the sorts of people they're looking to feature as books.
We have this smart line that sort of frames it, and it's about anyone who is unjustly stigmatized. And that could be due to social status, lifestyle, mental health, disability, ethnicity, orientation, occupation, family relations, victimization. And so we've got 15 pillars of prejudice at the foundation of our methodology. If you imagine you're in a physical library, we might have 15 bookshelves. And on bookshelf number 1, social, you could find immigrant, refugee, homeless, unhoused, unemployed, anybody whose social status has been impacted because of their circumstances and has a negative stigma or bias around it. Okay, so what are you, a gambler? That's why you're homeless? You lost all your money? You gamble? You're a drinker? And so on. So this would be just one of 15 categories. And in each category, we have an extensive selection of different topics where people said, hey, I have faced discrimination, bias, and prejudice. I've maybe even been, pursued because of who I am. And I'd love to be a resource to people who want to better understand people like me. So intersex, non-binary, all this new stuff that unless you know somebody personally, how do you really figure out what this is, And it can be in a world where we're also a bit afraid to say something wrong, to not get it right, to be perceived as, I don't want to call it ignorant, but the opposite of woke, even though we may be ourselves, like, hey, I'm pretty aware, I'm pretty respectful of everybody, and I don't discriminate. Then, sometimes just out of fear, we'll keep quiet. Because, hey, better not say anything so I can't be misunderstood. And especially if you don't think you have the correct vocabulary to describe, how you feel. And I think there we're helping also. Because you get to meet the source, the person who is intersex, the person who is a non-binary, or who is a trans, or who is, and they can help you understand the terminology.
But lest you think this just sounds like some sort of politically liberal social experiment, Ronnie is quick to tell you that's not at all his goal.
Other than hoping to further the understanding of mankind, we don't have any political agendas. I mean, a library is an institution. It doesn't have an opinion. And our library does not have an opinion either. We are with whoever is for mankind finding common ground. We're not, you could say, committed to neither Democrats or Republicans or independents. We're a neutral space. You could borrow a Trump supporter. You could borrow a member of the NRA who will speak to you about why they think it's important to be a card-carrying member of the National Rifle Association. Maybe when you walk away from that situation, you're going to be like, wow, I don't agree. I don't want to be a member. I don't need guns in my life in any kind of shape or form. All right. But at least now you spoke to this person and you understand why that's compelling or important to them. And I think the outcome is you connect with somebody that's completely away from your own social group or ethnic group or religious group, and you gain valuable insight to what's important and true for them, just for that person. So there's no universal truth here. You're getting that person's life facts for them, their truth. What you do with the knowledge you gain today is entirely in your hands. We're not a combat organization. We're not fighting prejudice or biases. No. We are creating safe spaces where you can challenge your biases and your prejudices and sort of figure out, wow, do the people fit the bill the way I thought they did?
The world is pretty big, though, and cultural norms vary wildly from place to place. So as the Human Library has spread to more and more countries, it's had to adapt to the needs of the specific locations where it's operating. Among his slate of books, Ronnie said there are some that he calls global bestsellers. In other words, individuals whose identities or backgrounds might mean they'd face some sort of discrimination pretty much everywhere.
And then you have your local topics, which are very interesting, actually. When I travel with work and I sometimes visit local communities, I'll meet books there that wouldn't be a book anywhere else in the world. Couldn't be a book simply because there's no stigma. So in Indiana, there is a group of Christians that I never heard of and that are sort of stigmatized locally in Indiana because they have this Christian faith that's a little bit apparently veers from the majority interpretations of the area. That's one example. In India, there is a tribe of dancers that's famous for their male being incredibly gifted performers. And so this group have quite feminine traits. And when they perform, they're also with makeup and costume and everything. And so there's a strong anger towards this group because some in India are saying it's men dressing like women. It's cross-dressing and it's perverted and it's wrong. And so they're very stigmatized. In Seattle, at Bainbridge Island, there are these people called the liveaboards. So the liveaboards are people that have a houseboat that they live on the water, which is blocking the view for all the rich folks that bought the private island view kind of thing. So there's a great conflict in the community. And at the Bainbridge Island Public Library event, we had the liveaboards on loan. So you could borrow them and figure out, dude, why are you living on your boat? And do you understand the frustration with the people on the land that are saying you're taking their ocean view? You're hurting their property value? These conversations are local.
Some of the Human Library's most interesting and memorable books, he told me, are people whose identities and experiences can't be put neatly in a single box.
So an example is the gay rabbi, because the gay topic is a group in our community, and it's something we can always use and publish. The rabbi, same thing. Of course, anybody who can help you challenge your prejudices about religion and belief and faith are, more than welcome on our bookshelf. But a gay rabbi is not a group in the community. You see? So when you borrow this person as the gay man, after a while into the conversation, you may ask, so what do you do if it's not visible? And the person will explain, well, I'm a rabbi at a local synagogue in London. Oh, really? And somewhere you're going to be a little surprised because you didn't know that a religious priest of the Jewish faith, a rabbi, could actually be gay. I mean, that they accepted this. But apparently they do, and at least in this community. And that surprised me when I heard about this book. If you borrow him as the rabbi, 20 minutes in, you may start asking about family, maybe even sooner. And you'll be like, so you have like 5 kids and a wife, and what is she, Orthodox? Or what's going on? And then he'll be like, no, I have a husband at home. And so you can dive in and realize this intersectionality, but we're not going to advertise it.
Not going to advertise it because Ronnie is well aware of the delicate role he asks volunteer books to play. I mean, on the one hand, his goal with the library is to provide a forum for curiosity so readers can conduct this sort of human Star Trek exploration, as he put it to me. But he also doesn't want to create a freak show.
This isn't about rare species or putting people on exhibition. When you come to join us and borrow a book and become a reader, you can't navigate the library by visually looking at the books and then saying, oh, give me the man with the red hair or the man with the long beard or the obese woman, please. You can take a look at our book board and sort of get an idea about what topics are on loan here today and what's available right now. And then decide and converse with the librarian about your biases and what you're hoping to achieve with the session or gain from the session. And then choose your book, you know? So we're not putting our people out on display. This isn't a social circus.
We'll hear more from Ronnie in a few minutes, but first I want to introduce you to another book I borrowed during my visit to Copenhagen's Human Library. And I should give a trigger warning here, since she mentions sexual abuse. So although she doesn't go into much detail, if you're not comfortable with that, you might want to skip ahead and rejoin me about 5 minutes from now.
My name is Louise, and I'm in here with the title Incest. So that's kind of what I talk a little bit about in here, but mostly the journey through how do you get sexually molested and actually live a normal and fulfilling life.
When you decided to become a book and get involved with the Human Library, was that difficult for you? Talking about these things with people out in the open, it's a topic that, is very sensitive for a lot of people.
No, it wasn't really. For me, it was nothing I should hide. He should be ashamed and go duck himself in a corner. But I should be in here and telling people that you can have a good life, even though something bad has happened to you. So no, it wasn't really that difficult. But I've been in some difficult conversations in here afterwards, yeah.
I'm sure it took a while to get to this point now where you're comfortable talking about it.
Yeah, this happened from I was 10 till I was 15. And I'm 37 today, so it took a while and some therapy lessons and some years also after the therapy to figure out where to place this in my life. What role should it play? Should it be allowed a role even? So I was pretty sure on what this was in my life before I became a book. This is not therapy. Being in the Human Library, it's not therapy, so you need to be quite comfortable in talking about it because you get some seriously crazy questions sometimes.
So it's not therapy, what is it?
For me, it's a way of a little bit preaching, without preaching actually, but when people come to me and borrow me, they often have these questions like, do you even have a normal life? Why aren't you more sad than you are? Why aren't you more quiet? Why aren't you mentally ill? So for me, it's more like if I can give somebody inspiration in here, if I can give them some life advice, or if I can teach them that you're not supposed to suffer for the rest of your life, I've done my job, I think.
What does this experience mean for you?
Oh, everything. Because when I hear about my story in the media, I'm supposed to be sitting in a corner crying and feel a little bit sorry for myself. And I had no role model. So this means everything to me. This is the spice in my life, in some way.
When you're planning, this Sunday's coming up and I'm going to be at the library, do you need to somehow mentally prepare yourself for that? Or afterwards, do you need to decompress somehow?
I don't mentally prepare for it, but I normally call either my mom or one of my friends on the way home to talk about, hey, I got this question. I didn't know how to answer. So yeah, I do call somebody. And I don't make any coffee dates or anything afterwards. I go home and sleep and be quite lonely for the rest of the day.
You need time to process it.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. What does your mom think of you participating in the Human Library?
I think she was a bit hesitant in the start. It was like, oh, are you sure you want to do that? And you're quite exposed. And I was like, yeah, I'm quite exposed, but have I done anything wrong? No. Okay, so let me be in it. And then I think she learned that through the last 4 years where I've been a book, I think she learned that it's actually something that makes our bond better, because we get some really good conversations out of it.
Do you feel a bond with the other books? Like you're all kind of people who've been misunderstood somehow?
Yeah, they are the best. I remember one of my first events in the Human Library, we had a briefing and it was like, hello, my name is, and I'm bipolar. Hello, my name is, and I'm schizophrenia. Hello, my name is. And I was like, wow, whoa, we are kind of a messed up bunch of people. And I've learned so much about the other books, and I'm so proud of them when they succeed in things in life. And it's just a bond between people where the one thing you will maybe never share with anyone, you share as the first part here.
It takes a certain person to want to do this.
It does. You got to be a little bit crazy.
And a little courageous, maybe?
A little bit, yeah. You got to be a little bit crazy hanging out your laundry for everyone. But it's clean now, so why not?
Louise's book is an extreme example, but Ronnie says difficult to discuss subjects are par for the course at the Human Library.
I'll give you a conversation topic that all of us need to go through, but none of us want to. Death. Sooner or later, that will play a role, preferably later, but we can't escape it. Many people are not comfortable talking about it. And when it happens, they're not ready to talk about it. They lost someone, or someone close to them lost, and they don't know how to support that person because they can't talk about it. It's the most common thing that happens to man or woman, is that we end. Why is it such a difficult conversation? So we have a lot of bereavement, grief. We even have people on our bookshelf that are terminally ill, giving time from their last time on this earth to the library bookshelf and sort of saying, hey, this is meaningful to me, helping others understand my journey. And I'm humbled by the support and love and commitment from all of our volunteers around the world, and from the courage of the readers in the books. One of our books has vitiligo, which is a skin disease. If you are an African American person, then you will have these spots on your skin, for example, very visibly. And that's one of the books that we have, is a woman in the States who is sharing her journey overcoming, the angst, the shame, the insecurity, saying, hey, I'm becoming more confident and more courageous to be myself. So early on when I met this volunteer, she had long sleeves on to sort of hide the condition. And by the time she was ready to be published as an open book after training and all that, on that day, she came with the short sleeves. And I just thought that was such a great image to give of the process that some of our volunteers go through. Every day I see we're helping, we have impact, like our Nigerian asylum seeker in Washington, D.C., who writes to me, after years on the bookshelf, that this is some of the most meaningful thing that's, happened to him since he moved to the U.S. Or readers who come up 17 years later and say, in 2004, I was there and I borrowed a Muslim and I borrowed a person in a wheelchair, and they remember their day. Or you hear this story of two readers meeting at a virtual human library. One is in Argentina and the other one is in France, and they end up becoming a couple. And they're in love. So anything can happen of what we're doing. We had one book with schizophrenia and obesity who had been medicated for many years. And after 5 years on the bookshelf, she'd lost weight enough to get the operation, went on to get a job, stopped with the meds, and ended up having a baby and getting married. And, I still follow her life. She's not a book anymore. She's done publishing. Then when I talk to her, she's always like, Ronnie, you won't believe how this library helped me on my journey. So that's the individual win for that one person. But I think readers potentially can win in the same way. Maybe it's less of an impact, but imagine living in fear of a certain group in your community. And you could come in here and you could connect with members of that group. And you could realize that your fear had no real reason. It was just lack of knowledge. Will that improve your life quality? Yes. If I can reduce fear in your life, I'm improving the quality of your life. And that's basically what we can do here, is we can destigmatize, help you destigmatize. We don't do anything except create the framework. You're doing the whole thing yourself. You're unjudging, you're developing, you're becoming a better person from engaging in this.
You're essentially trying to build empathy. Is that fair?
You could say we're trying to help people find their inner empathy, or realize that they don't have any. It's fair enough for you to walk out of there and say, hey, I don't give a hoot about this group or about people with this background. If that's who you are, that's who you are. I can't change you. I can only help you realize who you are and what you want to do with that knowledge. I'm happy to help inspire you, but that's all I can do. And like I tried to say for years now, we're not about tolerance. Who wants to be tolerated? I'd rather be understood and accepted and respected and recognized, or maybe even loved, appreciated, but tolerated. If that's your goal, to be tolerated, then you're in a bad position, aren't you? I mean, then you're really socially out there. So let's stop that whole talk about, we have to be tolerant. No, we have to be more understanding. Look, I disagree with you. I don't like where you come from. I don't like who you are. I don't like what you believe. I don't like what you eat. I don't like the God you pray to or whatever. But I understand why you do it. And so, peace be with you. Go do what you do. I'm not going to be like you, but I understand you. And I'll respect your right to be you.
Ronnie told me he totally gets where people are coming from when they're being judgmental, because he used to be that way himself. But being involved with the Human Library over the years and hearing people's stories has changed how he thinks about everything from religion and gender to obesity and people living with HIV. So he's made it his life's mission to advocate for more open dialogue.
We're so good at sending messages, writing emails, sending sound bites or whatever, but having important conversations about the things that we really need to be talking about, we're miserable. One of our readers from Japan framed it pretty good. After becoming our reader and taking part in an online session for Asian Pacific readers, the person said, wow, I can't believe I'm having these conversations. So unfathomable that we're talking about this complexity of social topics sort of out of the blue. For them, that's a far step from their normal train of thought. And so in every culture, there are things we don't speak about. And in a way, you could say I'm the provocateur saying we need to speak more about it.
According to its website, the Human Library is now spread to more than 80 countries on 6 continents, including places like Iran and Somalia. You can find details of future library events around the world on the Human Library's Facebook page, which we've linked to in the show notes. They also have a website, humanlibrary.org. We want to give a big thank you to Scott Gurian for sharing this delightful episode with us. You can find more episodes of Far From Home, Scott's documentary-style travel and culture podcast, on any podcast platform, or go to farfromhomepodcast.org. Scott is on Instagram and Facebook at Far From Home Podcast. We're on Instagram at Making Peace Visible and online at makingpeacevisible.org. Thanks so much for listening, and talk soon.